In this series of videos, we're going to be learning how to do basic dashboard functionality like layout and parameters and actions, all through the OList dataset. So remember, OList is a Brazilian e-tailer, and here we have a real dataset from this organization relating things like orders and customers and the reviews that customers left and the seller and the product category and all of the kind of stuff you would expect in a retail dataset like this. And there are lots of potential stories we can tell. So we're going to kind of go through the process of building some individual visualizations and then putting these visualizations into a dashboard and then starting to knit the visualizations together. So this is a pretty typical process by which we build dashboards. It's an iterative process, meaning that we do not do it right the first time. We build and we improve, and then we go back and we ask, is this doing what we want? And then we improve, and then we take a look, improve, take a look, improve, over and over and over again until we get a nice object. So if you're looking at a dashboard online or something and saying, how could they have just done this? They didn't just do it. They took it in 15 very small steps, as we will do over the next couple weeks. So let's go ahead and get started. So dashboards are built of individual visualizations, and so the place to get started with fit dashboards is to make the individual visualizations. So I should say, notice that I already have my data model set up. You should have done this in a previous assignment. If you haven't, just pause the video real quick and get your data model set up like this. And let's get started. So the first thing I would do if I were kind of going through and getting ready to start this, I would make sure, just do a quick scan here of my fields and make sure that everything is looking good. And for the most part, it does look this way. I want to make sure, because sometimes you get a little tricked. Okay, everything's looking good to me except for this here. So notice that geolocation latitude is classified as a geo field, but geolocation longitude is specified it right now as a typical measure. The reason for this is because this LNG is a non-standard abbreviation. Well, it's a semi-standard abbreviation. LON for longitude is more common. It doesn't really matter. We're going to go here to longitude and change the geographic role to longitude. So this is important because now if we select these two fields and we drag them onto the canvas, Tableau now knows exactly what's going on. Notice that we could have dragged state or city or whatever in here too, or customer city or customer state. They have pluses and minuses, and we'll talk through them at length actually at some point. The big one for right now is that latitude and longitude are not ambiguous. It's perfectly clear if I give you a latitude and longitude what I mean. If I give you a city and a state, actually there are, as we'll see, plenty of places where, like for instance, the same city is in multiple countries, and Tableau will get confused over whether we're talking about the US or Brazil or Portugal, and so we have to be a little bit careful if we use the kind of these named geofields as opposed to the latitude and longitude. So let's drag in order ID from the OList order items dataset into our detail, because right now, before we do that, we have one data point for the whole dataset because we've averaged the geolocations latitude and longitude. But if we drag in the order ID to detail, and we get a little warning, let's give it a shot. Oh, okay, good. So I've had both things happen. I've had this be very, very slow, and then I've had it be very, very fast. So let's keep an eye on it. If you're running into problems, let me know. It may be an issue related to the way the relationships were formed. It may be an issue related to your computational speed. And there are ways we can get around it, maybe with an extract or something like that. So let's keep an eye on it together. So now we have one dot per order, and you can see in the tooltip we have the order ID together with the latitude and the longitude, and we can start packing more information in here. So let's do, for instance, like the price. So the price here, if we drag this to size, we have our typical geospatial scatter plot where the size of the dot now is the sum of the order's value, which is exactly what we would want, right? So basically, the total order value is indicated by the size, and we might say, oh, like there's some interesting kind of large value transactions in this region here, which turns out to be Sao Paulo. We have some high value transactions here, which turns out to be Rio, and then you might ask yourself, well, what's going on here? So anyway, you're kind of setting the stage for telling a story. So that's sheet one, and let's call this, I don't know, we'll call it geospatial scatter. give these things names. And then sheet 2, let's do customer state, for instance, and we'll do that to our, actually let's do geolocation state. Not that it matters, but I want to be consistent. And then we'll do price to columns. So this is our kind of traditional bar chart, horizontal bar chart. Now the names here are not super readable. We could talk about how we might use the full state names. So for instance, like SP is Sao Paulo, RJ is Rio de Janeiro, and so on and so on. So we've got our two pieces, and just to see how we would get these two into a dashboard, let's kind of notice that we've been saying new worksheet down here for many, many weeks, but now we can actually say new dashboard. So new dashboard is a kind of an empty space. There's not much going on. And before I do this, let's just say horizontal bar. So price, let's do state, price, bar. You can call them whatever you want, but it just helps over here. So the point here is we can kind of play around. Like I can kind of put this here, and I might put this here, I don't know. And then you might ask yourself, okay, layout-wise, this is kind of a long vertically, so I might actually want the layout to be like this. The layout is not great, if I'm honest with you. Like it's kind of tough to see sometimes, kind of how these things go. But I can already see that these are much better than they used to be. And another thing, for instance, here is that like this seems like a bad use of space to me, all of this empty space. If we had more of these legends, we might want it. But for instance, I might go here and I might say floating. By saying floating, I can now kind of put it wherever I want, and it makes it a little bit more, it kind of fits in more compactly because you're not dedicating all that space to it. So a couple things. So obviously, in terms of layout, basically the best practice is that the most important thing should be in the top left. That's where people's eyes typically fall. And you should try to fall first. And you should try to orient things so that you're not fighting against the visualization. So in this case, for instance, Brazil, as we're showing it, is kind of a longish country, north to south. And so we want to kind of emphasize or kind of use all the real estate we can to display that. Same thing with our bar chart here. If we're using a horizontal bar chart, we want to make sure we're kind of orienting that vertically if we can to kind of get the most out of it. So while we're here, I also want to show a couple other things. So let's go back to our bar chart and let's sort this thing. So let's say sort this. We're going to sort it by a field, and that field is going to be price, and we're going to do descending. Okay, so just as a reminder, this would be to emphasize which states are most important in terms of total sales. So we're no longer making this really accessible for lookup. We're emphasizing some states are bigger than others. What I want to say with respect to the dashboard is that notice that the changes are live. So any changes I make to this visualization, this single sheet, will automatically take place in the dashboard. So these things are live linked. It's not like when I drag the visualization in, it's now static. It's not going to change from now on. These are live links between dashboards and their component visualizations. So one of the problems here, there's two problems. These are relatively low information density because there are other design elements that we're not using effectively, and we can use those design elements to link individual visualizations within the dashboard. So for instance, I might take customer state here and drag it to color, and that should be fast. Okay, good. And then I'll do the same thing over here. So I'll say customer state and drag it to color. And notice what's happened automatically. These colors have been synchronized between the two visualizations. So SP, Sao Paulo, is this color here. RJ, Rio de Janeiro, is this one here. I think this is Minas Gerais or something like that, is this one here. And so by doing this, we've done two things. One, we've packed more information in here, and we can actually kind of see these states in a way that we couldn't. And also, we give a very quick way for users, viewers, to cross-correlate these two visualizations within the dashboard. And that really is going to be the name of the game going forward, is tying these things together so the visualizations are working together rather than working against each other. And the more ways we can do that, the better off we'll be. So in general, if you're going to be using color over here, you should be using color wherever possible, the same in all visualizations in order to tie things together. And the same thing to a lesser extent for other design elements. But color is the one that's really going to draw people's attention. So the more we can use color consistently between the component visualizations, the better off we'll be. So already, like, you can see things that you want to kind of improve here, like this sheet one. I don't like that name. In fact, I typically don't even put the titles period, and you can just turn the thing off because it's not really that useful. They kind of know what they're looking at. Here, perhaps though, maybe not. It's clear that this is a map, a geospatial plot. But here, it's like, okay, what are we looking at? You would have to make a design call about whether you think price and state is enough, and whether you could get rid of the title or not. Again, we'll get into all of these nitty-gritties as time goes on. But for now, let's cut it. And future videos, we'll talk about parameters and actions as ways of making this kind of a more compelling situation.